Yep.
All right, so this week we do have the newly and improved notes on the doctrine of justification. And I believe last week we had, the first piece was correct, right?
Yeah, I think you read those first two
Roman numerals
fragments,
1
and
and 2, I believe.
things went awry.
Right.
Beyond that.
We began to talk about the problems of justification and start talking about the Holy Spirit. But as you can see, the page numbers do
Continue to increase.
They do and continue. They do not decrease by about 100 pages. That's correct. So, all right. So we are talking about justification, and then we began, like Guthrie typically does, is goes through the problems or criticisms and moves through it to prove his point by the end of the chapter. So we're now talking about problems with justification. Not that there's a problem with justification itself, but of course how the church understands justification or issues with it. So, we try to justify ourselves by our hard labor. So with the doctrine of justification, which is heavily supported by what theologian really did some really heavy work with justification?
Paul?
Those kind
Calvin.
of. Calvin, but who first?
Luther.
Luther. Right, Luther got into Romans, and this is it, right? You're saved by faith alone, right? Sola fides. And that became that's his soapbox.
Right.
Right? This is his stance. And so, as good Protestants, which we assure that we are, right? We say that we are saved by our faith alone, not by our works. And yet we have ourselves down here. We are justified by our hard labor. And how does that fit in here? Like, in what ways can we see this panning out, that we justify ourselves by our hard labor? It might not be that we say, yes, what I do saves me, but in what ways do we try to justify ourselves by our hard labor when you think about it in relation to salvation of the church?
I don't know. I mean, I'm mainly thinking of the concept of moral desert that I got from The Good Place.
Explain that.
Moral desert is you do something good, but it's not a pure motive because you're going to heaven and so you're not doing good for its own sake. You're doing something good with some kind of reward in mind.
Excellent. That's part of it. Yes, it's an excellent part.
Hi.
Is this Sunday school or is this?
Come on in.
Right.
It's Sunday school, but come on in.
All right. Well, I was going to turn on the light, but I guess you.
Yeah, come on in.
All
Come
right.
on in. Yeah, you got 12 minutes of hanging out with us.
Experiencing it live.
Because aren't we over here?
Yes. Yeah. All we have to do is move straight over. Right.
Good.
Welcome, Edie. So as we try to justify ourselves by our labor, and that's part of it, right? We think, well, we do things for a reason, right? You'll hear some Christians say, I'm doing this, I'm going to have crowns stored up for me in heaven. And really, that's not the right reason to do things, right? You should do them simply because Jesus said, do it, right? And not because we have a reward waiting for us, right? It's almost like if there's any reward, it should be a byproduct. Okay,
Right.
Thank you. So yes, that's part of it. The other part is something to the effect of we do things without even thinking about it. So we work for the church. We serve the church, right? It's what we're supposed to do, right? We work hard for the church, whether it be taking up collections, whether it be serving on the session, whether it be preaching, whether it be teaching, whether it be, helping out, sweeping the floors. It's everything. And I think without knowing it, it's kind of like something we do. So it's not so much, there can be some negative aspects, but it could be benign aspects too of this, right? We feel that this is the church, right? It's my duty, I do it, right? And I think at some point we all do it. But this doesn't justify us, right? It's just, we just do what we do, right? And I think that sometimes we feel that it's our duty to do as much as we can. And sometimes we do it. Some people do it, and you never hear a word from them. Some people do it, and it's all they talk about, right? But whatever the shape of it, it works it out. If, for instance, if someone is a workaholic in their general life, right, like when maybe it's their career or their vocation or a hobby, they might tend to become a workaholic in the church, right? Now, the church will definitely benefit from that, no doubt. But this is why Guthrie starts out, and a lot of times Guthrie will start out by, some of the ones that seem more benign than the others, But this is, it's not so much and this is why when we're talking about justification, it's not about the works, no matter even if they're very nice, Miriam, no matter if they are good, and yes, the church needs it because you have to do it, right? But when we talk about justification, we do try to justify ourselves by our hard labor, right? It is a factor in there. B, we try to justify ourselves by perfecting our image, right? That's a part of it too. How could we do that, or how do we do that when it comes to the life of the church or the life as a Christian? How do we try to perfect our image?
Well, by serving,
By serving, right? Good.
I'm not necessarily clear what it means by perfecting our image.
Perfecting our image. How important it maybe this.
How others look at us.
Yes.
Yeah, we're worried about how others
Perceive us, right?
rather than how God sees us.
Excellent.
Okay.
Good. Yes.
Okay, right.
So and this is all part of this, right? And so it's perception. It's a concern. It's about how our image is perceived within the community of the church, and maybe outside of the church, right? Externally. And so this is part of it too. So we try to justify ourselves by perfecting our image. How we are viewed, how we are seen. You don't want to be seen in a bad light. Don't do that. What will such and such and so think?
Right.
If you come to church in shorts, right? And I say that because these are things I've heard, right? Especially in Florida, where a lot of people wear shorts to church. They might be nice khaki shorts, but they're shorts nonetheless. It's hot. When I lived in Florida, in my home church, I used to go to church in nice khaki shorts and a button-down short sleeve print shirt. People, you have to be comfortable. You can sit there for an hour, not in a long sleeve, and hardly anyone wears, suits. Hardly anyone wears three-piece suits. You're dying if you are.
We try to justify ourselves by our being uncomfortable.
I guess that would be a work. That would be a work. Yes, it would. Yes, it would. We try to justify ourselves by being critical of others. This is one of my favorites.
I know people could do that.
Oh, yeah.
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 Oh, yeah. By being critical of others.
That was a joke. I was criticizing others.
Come on in. Come on.
Anyway.
I get it now.
Okay.
All right. Come on in. So by being critical of others, people who think that they are being the official church police. Right. So instead of being on the one side where you're concerned more about what people are wearing to church, this would be the individual who says you should not be wearing those shorts to church. You should not have that hair past your collar. You should not do that. That's inappropriate. This is wrong. And that happens too. So it really happens on both sides of the fence, right? We worry about what people think about us, and then there are people who do it for us, who are critical of us. And that doesn't make anyone feel good. God doesn't need a police officer. That people and a lot of times it's kind of sugar-coated by saying, I'm holding this person accountable. No, you're not. You're not holding that person accountable. Well, let's call it what it is. You're not holding anyone accountable. And, it's not like that person's going home and sacrificing a goat to the Dark Lord. They're not. Most of the time it's over things that an individual has an issue with for their own reasons. Maybe when they grew up, they were not allowed to wear such things to church. So these are things, you're not really holding someone accountable, if this individual is coming and doing what they're supposed to be doing, right, in the eyes of God. So we try to justify ourselves by being critical of others. D, we try to justify ourselves by being critical of ourselves. Right? Sometimes we are our own worst what? Enemy and critic. Critic. We're very hard on ourselves. And so, we can put ourselves in our own vices and jails, and, we can be very hard on ourselves. I see this a lot as a minister, especially when people are grieving or they're angry at God for a period of time within their lives, and then after the fact, I'll have a parishioner come to me and say, I feel horribly guilty because I was angry with God because such and such passed away, because of my divorce, because of my loss. And it's that guilt that people put on themselves that, it's my job as a minister to help them release that and say, this is not, God has tough skin, don't worry about it, God knows. It's okay. Let it go, right? As Elsa says, right, in Frozen, let it go, right? Just let it go. So yes, we are very critical of ourselves. God knows we are not perfect. So don't hold yourself in this light of perfection when God knows that we are not perfect creatures. We're not. We can't be. So don't be too hard on yourself. And finally, in E, we try to justify ourselves by trying to be good. We try very hard to be good. We want to be good people. We want to be accepted by God. We want to be in the right place. We want to do the right things. We just want to do these things. We want to be good people. And, so some of these things are not necessarily bad, right? It's okay to want to be a good person. It's okay to want to be that person. But when it comes to justification, and this is the theological point of justification, is that these things don't deal with the theological concept of justification itself, right? Because justification is by what? Is by grace, right? So there's nothing that we've done, nothing that we do. You can't buy it, you can't do things for it. It's just simply given, right? It's a gift, right? And think about, in a very in the allegory of the cave sense, right? A gift is, when we give gifts to each other, a lot of times, maybe there's strings attached. If someone says, "Oh, this is nice," and you can see they're not really happy with it, and right away it makes you feel, shouldn't have given that person that. But the way God gives grace, it's not freely, it's given to us, right? No more, no less. We all get what we need, and that's it, right? It's perfect. But when we think about justification by grace, we're going to see as we go further within the study that the reason why these things are problematic above it A through E is that God doesn't work by these things. God does not look at these things as grace is given to us, right? These things can't earn it. It is what it is. And this is one of the pieces of Christian theology, of Reformed theology, that it's almost baffling and puzzling. And because it's God's ability to do this is incredible when we think about people like St. Paul, who is forgiven and grace is given to him as he was out killing Christians. And it makes you think, well, that person surely can't do it. That person surely is not worthy of it. And you say, it's hard for us, because we do have our preconceived thoughts about individuals, as I'm sure that the early church did about Saul. And we know this, right? I just sound like Chris Tucker for a second. And we know this, man. Right? And we do know this because what? As Ananias was called to go to Paul or Saul, Ananias, go to Saul. He's waiting for you. And Ananias says, wait, time out. We talk about the same guy? Saul, right? The guy who's like killing us, actively seeking us out to kill us. And God's saying, yes, I know Ananias. It's okay. Don't worry. He's going to be working for me from here on out. And it's this, people recognize that. It's not that, people forget things easily, but this is the power of justification by grace. It doesn't make sense in our world, and perhaps part of it is the way God views justice compared to our idea of justice, right? Remember, it's different. We went through Guthrie in earlier chapters about it's very different from ours. Ours is even Steven, people get what they deserve, and that's great. I'm not complaining about that. But when it comes to God, it's very different. There is no blind justice. God takes off that blindfold, throws it in the corner, and says, I've seen everything. And now I make my decisions, right? Very different from our concept of justice. All right, so we'll continue next week, and thank you for our guests who are here.
Who photobomb, or not photobomb, Cupid.